at 17. Didn't work for, um, did not work for Walmart or Burger King or Hardee's or any of those places. My very first job was working for the Department of Energy. So worked for the Department of Energy and did that all through college. And when I graduated from undergrad, I got recruited by um, NIWIC. Now it's was called NIWIC today. It was called the Space and Naval Warfare System Center. So, like many of you guys, I get the question all the time. What is it that the government buys? Well, the government buys a little bit of everything from landscaping services to logistics to courier support to security guard services, IT, home health care, and a little bit of everything in between. I mean, we're talking more than $1 trillion. This is post COVID numbers. More than $1 trillion annually is spent in government contracting. Oh, before I forget, like, subscribe, and share. Going to grow this channel. Really want to make sure we do a good job of putting good information in the YouTube streets. There are a lot of government contracting gurus. You could have chose anywhere to come. But what I endeavor to do here, we're not about selling courses. Do we have a course that you can buy? Of course. But it's not about that. It's about providing as much good, valuable content into YouTube land as possible. One of the things that I think is real key, and I'm going to jump into my story, but one of the things is real key, as your knowledge filter increases, you're going to be better at being able to disseminate quality information you should consume and those that you shouldn't. The old cliche, eat the fish, spit out the bones. So my objective here is to raise your knowledge base so you can better discern information that you should be consuming and information you shouldn't. But what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about how I got in government contracting. So like I said, I started government contracting in high school at 17 years of age. Now, let me say this, government contracting, working as a government contractor, I worked for Department of Energy specifically. That was the agency I supported. I worked for Bechtel and Westinghouse. That education did not prepare me to be a government contractor. I've also worked for the federal government. I was employed by, I said earlier, by the agency now known as NIWIC. That's the Naval Information Warfare System Center. They were not always called NIWIC. They were initially called, well, not got their name changed a few times. They were initially called the Space and Naval Warfare System Center. They've now renamed their name to NIWIC. So if you hear me say NIWIC or SPAWAR, I'm talking about the same place. So I got to SPAWAR in 2003 after graduating from undergrad. I went to University of South Carolina. I am a Gamecock. And so when I was graduating from USC, South Carolina, not Southern California, when I was graduating from USC, I had never even heard of these guys. Matter of fact, a friend of mine told me who the agency was. He was from that part of town. I'm not going to talk about his city, but he was from kind of closer to the area. And so he's the one who put SPAWAR, now called NIWIC, even on my map. So I go and I start working for SPAWAR. I did a bunch of different jobs, but I want to fast forward. So I was at SPAWAR from 2004 until 2010. And what happened in 2008 is when my life began to change. I met a gentleman, actually 2007. I met a gentleman who was who had left military service and was working as a contractor. So here we got a high school graduate, no college, didn't even retire from the Navy, left the Navy, and did some odd and end jobs, and then eventually people helped him along the way. He started a government contracting firm. So that's kind of his story. When we met, fast forward 2007 timeframe, when we met, he was already a multimillionaire. Now, I didn't know this at the time, by the way. He was already a multimillionaire, and he was had done quite well for himself. We developed a relationship over time, and over time, I learned how successful he was. But everybody used to tell me, little brother, that's what he used to call me, you can do this. You can do this too. Matter of fact, he said, you are smarter than I am. But this is going against my paradigm because many of us, I can't say all, many of us were taught, go to school, get a good job, and then at some point you're going to retire. So now I'm meeting someone who is wrecking, and I do mean wrecking my paradigm. You know, he has not went to college. He has not stayed at the same company and retired. But yet I have learned over time, this young man, I think I was in my mid to late 20s. He was in his early 30s, early 30s. And this guy is running $5-6 million contracts in his early 30s. I had never seen anything like this. But he was encouraging me along the way, giving me some tips along the way. We ended up spending a lot of time together, and we developed a true friendship. Nothing nefarious, anything like that happened, but we developed a true friendship. And over time, I remember one particular incident. He was actually in my hometown. He was doing business. We call it BD, business development, trying to grow sales process, for lack of a better term. We'll talk about that in later videos. But he was doing business development, trying to cultivate a relationship with the agency that I was working for. He ended up getting a small piece of work, but it ended up not working out for him long term. But I digress. So I remember one time in particular, we were in my hometown. Well, not my hometown, but the town that I lived in at that time, because I wasn't originally from Charleston, South Carolina. I was relocated to Charleston, South Carolina, by way of the Space and Naval Warfare Systems Center, which has now been renamed. So I remember one time in particular, we were in the mall. Matter of fact, we were in Northwoods Mall in Charleston, South Carolina. And at the time, we're talking late 2000s. I was not able to afford that kind of clothing at that time. And at the time, one of the popular brands was Crown Holder. A Crown Holder shirt back then, if you know anything about that brand, would have cost you about $150 to $300. The Crown Holder jeans back then were about $600. So if you had on the Crown Holder shirt, Crown Holder pair of jeans, you had, not including shoes, you had almost 900 shoes, over $1,000 worth of gear on. But I remember we were in the store where they sold Crown Holder at. I had never heard of the brand prior to him. I don't think they're in business anymore, to my knowledge. But he had to go to the ATM. And I remember he said, "Hey, I need to go to the ATM. I need to re-up." Oh, that's what he said. I need to re-up. Need to get some more money. So we go to the ATM, and he goes to the ATM, and he completes the withdrawal. And I don't know why he did this, but he did it. He showed me his ATM slip. When I looked at the ATM slip, it had about 250,000. I don't remember the exact number. It's been well over a decade. By no means am I trying to embellish the story, but it was 200 plus in the account. And he shows it to me. He says, "Look at this." And he says, "One day that's going to be you," because he was trying to encourage me to pursue government contracting. Now, I was in a government contracting job, but however, my government contract, no, back up. I worked in government contracting. Now I work for the federal government. And my federal government job did not prepare me in any way to go in this direction. But through his mentorship and some trainings and other things that I took, over time, I developed the skills. Now, I normally tell people, can you get out and hit fairly quickly? Yes. But the reality for most is, especially if you have no experience doing this, the reality for most is it takes about 18 to 24 months to successfully land. Okay. So I started the company in 2008. It was 2010. I'm still working for the federal government, doing what I'm supposed to do legally to make sure I'm not doing anything that the government would frown upon. So I'm doing my briefings. with the federal government, knowing what I can and can't do. And one of the things I was told I couldn't do is I could not market directly to my agency's customers, and that's what I did. I did not touch their customers to avoid any type of impropriety. So it took me about 24 months to get the government contracting company started. Now, why did it take me so long? I knew nothing about registration. I knew nothing about marketing. Now, marketing in a B2B or B2G space is very different than marketing B2C. So when we do government contracting, we're doing B2B, business to business, or B2G, business to government marketing. Very different than B2C. So I had to learn that. I had to learn how to finance the company because I didn't come into this with great credit. Now, you may have great credit. I did not come into this game more than a decade ago with great credit. So I didn't know how I was going to finance any business we did, but I learned that. So I had a lot of hurdles and a lot of things to learn. Now, spoiler alert, when you do business in the federal space as a prime or a sub, a prime meaning you have the direct relationship with the federal government, sub meaning you're playing an indirect role to someone who has a direct relationship. When I came into this space, the thing that I quickly learned is my funding was not based on my credit. It was based on the credit worthiness of my customer. And this is very different. So because in personal life, you can't get the house or the car if your personal credit isn't good. So in the B2B, B2G space, I learned that my credit worthiness was not based on me, but on my customer. In this case, it was a very large Fortune 500 company. If I call the name, you would know them. So typically, most businesses, brand new, are not what I call bankable, meaning the bank, I'm not talking trade credits, I'm not talking personal signature loans, I'm talking about any of that. But I'm talking about the business being bankable, typically a new business isn't bankable. Typically, a business needs income statement, balance sheet for 3 years, financial statements, income sheet, balance sheet, statement of cash flows. No one really asks for that. It's really the income statement, profit and loss statements, another term for it, and balance sheet. That's typically what the federal government, or not, excuse me, that's typically what the bank's looking for. And then you need 3 years of tax returns. Typically, when you get to that point and you're profitable, typically you can place yourself, it's easier to place yourself in a financing situation with the bank, whether that's a traditional line of credit, whether that's a small loan, or an asset-based lending arrangement where you're basically doing invoice-based finance. But I digress. So I had a lot of things I didn't know. And so that's why it took me 24 months to get started, because there was not a plethora of information available like there is today. I mean, you go on YouTube and you can find a bunch of gurus. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Everything that you hear in government contracting isn't always legal. I'm not throwing stones at anyone, but some of the things that you may hear on government contracting, you want to be very careful where you consume your content from, because you could be learning strategies that are highly illegal. And I'm gonna leave it at that. So be very careful about where you consume information. So one of the reasons why I'm going to make sure that I want to drop a lot of free content is I want to raise the standard, and I want to be able to increase your filter. But back to my story. So we're in the mall with my friend. And in the mall with my friend, he goes to the ATM. I see this statement, and I'm like, whoa, this goes against everything that I was taught about money. Here we got a young guy, mid-30s, multimillionaire, looks like me, goes against all of the traditional stereotypes that we would typically hear. Highly successful, not highly educated. Doesn't mean he wasn't smart, because he was a smart guy. You're not in any shape, you're not intelligent or unintelligent because you didn't go to college. But again, this goes against the paradigm of what you would typically see. But this gentleman became very influential in my life. Now, fast forward, that was in 2008, 2010, mentorship, training, reading, doing everything I can to learn. Even went and got a business degree. I'm not telling you got to do that. That's what I did. 2010, I leave government service. Now, I don't want to sing. I don't want to, in any ways, um, overly uh, dramatize what took place prior. But the year prior, my wife, who was an acting CFO for a defense contracting firm, a government contractor, was let go. The company was going through a bankruptcy. I forget if it was chapter 11. I forget. Yeah, I think it was chapter 11. So they were being restructured. Another company was coming in to acquire them. And if you know anything about bankruptcies, especially the ones where you can restructure the company, typically the acquiring firm lays off what we call back office staff. So HR, finance, accounting, those people leave, and the acquiring company typically has those people. So you will have redundancy of function. So she was let go. So we have worked off of a two six-figure household for a while at this point. If you know anything about money, you find yourself in a difficult situation. It does not take long for any kind of money that you have saved to start to dwindle if one of your major breadwinners is no longer employed. And I think we all know this. So in that year's time, the money that we had saved, we were having to use it to cover shortfalls. We had won a contract. So I was working. I was working at night. I was in my evenings. I was working on my business, and I would basically spend 9 to 5 or whatever my hours were at work. And then I would come home and try to get this fledgling business off the ground that had no revenue coming in. And you may relate to that. No revenue coming in. I got a dream and I got ambition, and I'm not really quite certain how this was going to work. But I applied some principles, and we won a contract in August of 2010. Now I don't know how to monetize the contract. I'm not quite certain how I'm going to hire people. I got a whole lot of uncertainties going on. So it looked very unfavorable for me to even contemplate quitting my job. Now, just go ahead and throw my disclaimer. I am a PK. I'm not a pastor, but my father is. So I grew up in a faith-based household. And I do believe in sometimes we have to take a leap of faith. Now, I'm not the guy who just tells you to start a business and jump. I'm not that guy. But I do believe in creating soft landings for yourself. Now, in retrospect, this was probably as soft of a landing as I could have created. We won a contract. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I mean, I knew what it meant, but I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant in terms of a monetization event. And I felt that I was supposed to quit my job in September. But like many of you, fear stalled me. I looked at the obligations that I had: fairly new home, 2 kids in private school, fairly new vehicles. And I'm looking at the weight and the pressure, and I talked myself out of quitting my job. October comes. A gentleman comes in my office. For the sake of this story, we're going to call him Ron. Ron comes into my office and says, "Brother Curtis." Now, me and Ron would have conversations about our relationship with Christ. We would have these conversations, and we had a relationship, but I can't say at that time that we had a very intense relationship. But I remember this evening very vividly. September 2010 goes, October 2010 is in. It's about mid-month October. Ron comes in my office. It's fairly late. Office is fairly empty. He comes in and he says, "Brother Curtis, you're not supposed to be here anymore. And when are you going to obey God?" I sit back in my chair, and what feels like 5 minutes was probably just seconds, maybe 30 seconds. I jump up from my chair and I go and I look for Ron. He's not in the building. I check the parking lot. I don't see his car anywhere. I call his cell phone. He doesn't answer. I go home and I tell my wife what happens. And she says, what are you going to do? And I say to her, well, I guess I'm going to type up my letter of resignation. Now, I need you to understand this. This was right after the housing crisis of 2008. So all the money that I had saved in my 401k had quickly diminished. I may have had $12,000. So I put in my letter of resignation. My supervisor at the time, call him John for the sake of this story. John says, Curtis, are you sure that this is what you want to do? And I said, this is what I have to do. And he gave me every reason in the book for why I should say, what about your health insurance? What are you gonna do? And his concerns were legitimate. But I turned my letter of resignation in. And after I resigned from my job, I cashed in my 401k. I had about $12,000, had way more than that before the housing crisis. I cashed in what I have left of my 401k. And after penalties, because you would take your money out your 401k earlier, they're going to hit you with some penalties. After penalties, I may have had $9,000. Sounds like a lot, but remember, we had built the household early in my story based on 2 six-figure earners. So this is not a lot. Now, I had won this contract. Again, not really understanding all the implications of what it means to win a contract at this time. This is my first rodeo. I'd never done this before. And the insurance, we were actually doing a contract overseas. I had never even managed an overseas contract before. So all of this was new territory for me. And we had to have something called DBA insurance. That's Defense Base Act insurance. We were doing some intelligence contracts overseas. The insurance is $6,000 per $100,000. So of my $9,000, I had to give $6,000 to the insurance carrier for this insurance for this contract that I don't know how I'm gonna monetize or any of that. Now, luckily for me, I asked questions and I was able to finance that insurance, but I still had to put down a significant down payment. Now, let me say this. You'll get all these people come on here and they'll tell you about how glamorous it is to be a government contractor. Government contracting, let me be very clear, changed my life. It literally changed my life. However, it did not just just appear. There was a little bit of pain I had to go through. So I quit my job in October. November and December, I was eating, my wife and I and my little kids were eating Cheerios. We were eating Cheerios. And I have every reason to start to believe that this is 2010. I have every reason to believe that I may have made a mistake. But one thing about soldiers, if you look at history, when captains went into war, generals went into war in the olden days, and they would come in on their ships, the first thing they would do was burn the boats. They wanted their soldiers to fight to the bitter end. So I felt like in that moment, I had burned all my boats. I have to make this work. The stakes are way too high. But my wife believed in me. I believed in me. I'm going to tell you what I didn't do. I did not tell friends or family what I had done because I did not need any negativity. I was already second guessing what I was doing at that time. I didn't quit my job. I was a GS-14 equivalent. My wife had got laid off the year prior, no fault of her own, just through a merger and acquisition / bankruptcy that went left. The restructure just didn't go in our favor. And I'm quitting my job. I'm quitting my job hoping that this is going to work out for me. But November and December of 2010 are looking bleak. Long story short, January of 2011, we hire our first employee. I didn't even have the money to put him on a plane and sit and fly him from his home state to the customer site in Northern Virginia, Arlington, Virginia. I didn't have the money. Thankfully, he did. He didn't even know that I didn't have the money. So I said, hey, go ahead and book your airfare and whatever expenses you accrue, we'll reimburse you. I'm saying this, and I don't really know how I'm going to do this. This is a straight faith walk for me. Again, my dad is a pastor. I'm not, but my father's a pastor. So I am literally walking by faith at this moment. And so he buys his plane ticket. I finally find out how I'm going to get paid from the work he's done. End of the month goes by, and I'm figuring out how am I going to fund this invoice. I find a financing company that is able to help me. They explain the process to me, and I teach that process. They explain the process to me, and I use that process. So the end of January. Now I quit my job in October of 2010. November, December. Um, it's like I'm living off manna from heaven. January comes, and still no revenues come in. January comes. Now we're in a position. Employee flies himself. I promise to repay. We finally are in a position where we can um, invoice for the work. So the way government contracting works, you do the work and then you get paid in arrears. Now you can be a net 30, net 45. Now there's some things that happened since then. You got the Prompt Payment Act, and so now you can actually get paid in 15 days. But that wasn't Prompt Payment Act didn't happen until around 2014, 2015 ish. There was no prompt payment in 2010. So you had net 30. Net 30 means, if you're not familiar with that language, net 30 means is once I submit an acceptable invoice, meaning there's no errors in it, I will be paid within 30 days. You could be net 45. Same rules. I submit an acceptable invoice and I get paid 45 days. Now, if there's an error in my invoice, it could potentially, in air quotes, restart the clock. So you don't want to make any mistakes. Now, when there were errors, we got pretty good at, and there wasn't many, we got pretty good at, mitigating and resolving and moving forward. It happened a couple of times. You don't make mistakes on your invoices because you want to get paid. But so January comes, the company has generated $12,000 because our employee is working. Now that entire $12,000 is not mine. My wife and I are working for free, and I have to pay the employee. So after I pay him, there may be $3,000 or $4,000 left because he's overseas. And those bill rates, if you remember that 2000, starting say mid 2000s after 9/11 until maybe mid 2010s, people were going overseas and they were making tons of money. Make 165, 225, 275 back in that time was not unreasonable. And it's not like that anymore. But it wasn't unreasonable in that time period. So this particular employee was making in the a little more than mid 100. So I think around 160, 170 is what we were paying him. So that most of that money went to him, not to us. So again, we haven't gotten a check now from November, December, and now January. We're going into February. I found a financing arm. We got some money coming in. I keep a few thousand, but most of it goes out in payroll. Time goes on. Fast forward, March, we got about 3 or 4 people billing. We go from $12,000 to about $35,000 a month. Okay, so things is getting better. Fast forward from March to about April, May, and I haven't looked at my financials from way back then in a while, so my numbers may be a little hazy, but they're not off by much. So I go from that to about 55,000. By the summer, June, July timeframe, I'm at 85,000 a month. So how is this working? I'm hiring people, and if they do work, I'm invoicing in arrears, and I got my financing all worked out, and I found a way to finance the company, even though my credit is horrible at that time. I found out how to do this. Again, we're talking more than a decade ago, and so we win another contract. I took the principles that I teach. We win another contract, and so now I went from 1 contract to 2 over the summer. By September of 2011, I was making more money in a month than me and my spouse were making collectively. Now, By no means am I trying to paint this picture that these results are the same for everybody. But what I've done, it can be repeated. It can be repeated safely. It can be repeated. It can be repeated. So when I say government contracting literally changed my life, I grew up on free and reduced lunch. I was wearing my uncle's hand-me-downs. I wasn't that amazing of a student. Matter of fact, I remember very vividly, I believe it was second grade. I can even call the teacher's name, but I won't. She wanted to keep me back. I don't know if she just disliked me, if I was really just struggling that much. I don't know. It may have been a combination of the two. And she wanted to keep me back in second grade. She said, I struggled staying on my reading level until about middle school. Somewhere around sixth grade, something broke, and I started really doing much better. I was not an A student by any stretch, but I was doing considerably better. I think I made the honor roll for the first time in seventh grade. And then I did graduate high school with honors, but it was a rocky start. So I wasn't dumb by any stretch of the imagination, but some things just took a little more time for me to learn and grasp. But why do I tell you this story? I tell you this story because I had more than my share of adversity getting here. I had every opportunity to turn my back and quit and say, you know what, there got to be a better way or easier way, or let me just stick with the status quo. So if you're on this live, if you stumbled across this YouTube video at a later time, I'm here to encourage you that whether it's government contracting or whether it's something else, take the gamble. Take the gamble, because future generations are dependent upon your obedience. When you get afraid and you stay stuck in your fear and you don't move forward, future generations pay as a result. So what I want to encourage you to do is to move forward. Now, what we're going to do on this channel is I'm going to continue sending you information that is going to give you tangible tools that you can use. I'm going to dedicate some time just to talk about government contracting. I have been inundated with questions. So I've already prepared a stream of videos that you're going to come from this page that are going to be absolutely free. There will be an opportunity for you to take a class or two with me if you choose to. No obligation. But my commitment to you is to send a stream of information that you can use. Now, I'm going to primarily focus on government contracting, but the things that I'm going to teach can be applied to business. See, what I didn't tell you, I told you I was named the Gamechanger by the White House in 2020. By the White House Policy Advisor for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. I'm almost done with a PhD. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit to giving back so that you too can change your life, just like government contracting changed mine. So the information I'm going to teach is going to be very government contracting specific, but you'll be able to apply it to any business arena. I promise you, because the thing that I've learned, if you learn the principles here, they can be applied. So when I'm talking government contracting, I'm typically talking federal. That's my sweet spot. But these principles can be applied at the state government level, at the local government level. And if you learn the rules here, and even international, I don't want to forget about my international people. So whether it's Africa, certain continents, whether it's the UK, which is, I love. UK is one of my favorite places in the whole world. So, but government contracting is anything that deals with the government. Now, my specialty is federal. I love federal for a whole lot of reasons that I won't get into today because we'll be here for another hour. But government contracting, state, local, municipal, county government, as well as federal. Now, I prefer federal. So most of the time when I talk on this channel, you're going to hear it from a federal perspective. But many rules apply. Now, let me go ahead and throw this caveat out there. I like the federal government because it's standardized. We have something called the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, which governs federal contracting at the federal level. When you start dealing with states and municipalities, you'll see that the rules would change. So if you're in New York, the rules in New York are going to be very different than the rules in Philadelphia. And the Philadelphia rules are going to be different from Florida. And Florida's going to be different from South Carolina and Georgia. You get the idea. It's going to vary from state to state. Same thing is going to happen at the local level. What happens in Cuyahoga County, it's going to be different than what happens in Cobb County in Georgia. It's going to be different. So as you get more granular, the rules are going to be slightly different as you seek to expand. So that's one of the reasons why I like federal. Now, there's a lot of state government contractors. There's a lot of local and municipal and county. Nothing wrong with that. My personal preference is federal. Now, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about on this channel in future videos can be applied at the state and local level. However, recognize there may be some nuance because of the rules there. So again, I like federal. I like federal because of the standardization. So federal rules apply in all 50 states and U.S. territories, and anywhere where we have an overseas presence and there is a government contract in that overseas location. Like when I got started, we were doing work in Afghanistan and Kuwait. Well, the same rules that applied in the U.S. applied in Afghanistan, Kuwait, and anywhere else that there's a forward operating base. So long as there's a federal presence, the federal rules of government contracting, the FAR specifically, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, applies. So I like the standardization. And I honestly think you make more money on the federal side. Just my opinion. I feel like state and local, there's a lot more red tape and there's less money because the state and local has less money to spend than the huge federal government. Just my preference. Again, there's no preference, but I want to specify government contracting is not just federal, although I focus on federal. You got international, federal, state, and local. But once you learn the rule set here, it's very easy to apply in commercial industry. The names change in terms of the labor category or the name of the position, but a lot of the functionality exists there. You just got to know what it's called in that space. Okay. But that's all I want to share with you guys. Thank you so much for taking time out your busy schedule to tune in, listen to me sharing today. And I encourage you to like and share the page. You will be seeing more pre-recorded videos that are going to go up that we're going to work to demystify the process. So do I got a course I can sell you? Yeah. But is it about that? No. It's more about making sure you have the information that you need to be successful to apply at whatever level you're on. And then if you get to the point where you say, you know what, I'm ready to make the investment, great. But my goal here is to flood you with a lot of free content that you can use that's going to raise your business acumen. And I love it if you can apply it in the federal space. But I believe a lot of the information you're going to find on this channel can be applied in the business space at large. Thank you for tuning in. And I want you to enjoy the rest of your day. And until the next video.